Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. Steven here with Team Euphoric, and this is day 13 of the 80 Days to Your Dream Body course. Today's protein source is going to be beef brisket, and today's going to be a legs and abs training routine. And right now, I'm going to be taking you through the strength training anatomy and explaining which muscles are involved during each of the legs and abs training exercises. Now let's get started. And now it is time for the main portion of the resistance training workout. And for the first exercise, you want to pick some type of squat pattern. For myself, I'm going to be doing the barbell front squat. Now let's get into the strength training anatomy and explain which muscles are going to be involved during this exercise. At the thoracic and lumbar spine, because we are maintaining that upright posture, we are doing thoracic and lumbar extension. Our extensors, that is primarily going to be the Erector Spinae group. So from lateral to medial, we have the iliocostalis, the longissimus, and the spinalis. We're also going to be training the multifidus, the quadratus lumborum, and the interspinalis. Then at the hips, we are focusing on hip extension. Because we are focusing on hip extension, that means that primarily we're going to be training the gluteus maximus muscle, 3 out of the 4 hamstrings muscles, the semimembranosus, semitendinosus, and the long head of the biceps femoris, because that's the only one that crosses the hip. And we're also going to be training the posterior fibers of the adductor magnus. We're also going to be getting a little bit of assistance from the posterior fibers of both the gluteus medius and minimus. Then down at the knee, we are doing knee extension. Because we are doing knee extension, you know that's going to be the quadriceps group. So we got the vastus medialis, intermedius, lateralis, and the rectus femoris. And then down at the ankle, we are doing ankle plantar flexion. So pointing the toes down toward the floor. That's primarily going to be the gastrocnemius, the soleus, the plantaris, the tibialis posterior, the flexor hallucis longus, the flexor digitorum longus, and the peroneus longus and brevis. With regard to the front squat, I love doing the front squat because it is a great postural exercise. If you find that a lot of people tend to slouch over because they're either at their computers, they're eating, they're on their phones all day, what happens is with the barbell front squat, because the bar is around the front of the shoulders, you need to really focus on keeping that thoracic spine in extension. Otherwise, the bar is just going to come crashing forward. So for anybody who has postural issues or if they have a hyperkyphotic posture, learning how to properly do a front squat is going to be terrific. In 3, 2, 1, down, 2, hold, 1, hold. And while we are resting, it is time to move on to the second exercise of the lower body portion of the training routine. And for the second exercise, we want to focus on some type of bending or hip hinging pattern. For myself, I'm going to be performing the seated good morning. With regard to the strength training anatomy, which muscles are we going to be training when we are performing the seated good morning? Well, at the lumbar spine, we are performing lumbar extension. So you should know this by now. Lumbar extension is primarily going to be the Erector Spinae group. So that's going to be from lateral to medial, the iliocostalis, the longissimus, and the spinalis. We're also going to be training the multifidus, the quadratus lumborum, and the interspinalis. Then moving down at the hips, we are doing hip extension. Your hip extensors, you should know this as well. This is going to be your gluteus maximus muscle, as well as 3 out of the 4 hamstring muscles. We have the semimembranosus, the semitendinosus, and the long head of the biceps femoris, not the short head because that only crosses the knee. And then we are also going to be getting some recruitment from the posterior fibers of the adductor magnus. We will also be getting some assistance from the posterior fibers of both the gluteus medius and minimus, but not quite as much as the other muscles mentioned. Then at the knee, what are we doing? Well, we are not actively doing any type of knee flexion. However, we are going to be maintaining an isometric contraction of the knee flexors. So your knee flexors, that is going to be the hamstrings group, all of them, the semimembranosus, tendinosus, and both the long and short head of the biceps femoris. We're also going to be training the gracilis, the sartorius, the gastrocnemius, because the gastrocnemius does cross the knee posteriorly as well. So it is also responsible for knee flexion, not just plantar flexion. And then we were also going to be training the popliteus, and to some extent, we are also going to be getting some assistance from the plantaris muscle. Then if we move down to the ankle, at the ankle, we are doing ankle plantar flexion, and we are not actively going into plantar flexion, but as with the knee flexors, we are going to be maintaining an isometric contraction. So isometrically, we will be training the gastrocnemius, the soleus, the plantaris, the tibialis posterior, the flexor hallucis longus, the flexor digitorum longus, and the peroneus longus and brevis. In 3, 2, 1, down, 2, hold, 1, hold. And while we are resting, let's move on to the third exercise. For the third exercise, we want to pick something that is going to focus on the abdominals. And since we just completely hammered home trunk extension and hip extension, we want to focus more now on trunk flexion and hip flexion. For myself, I'm going to be going back to the exercise I did in block 1 and choosing the low pulley cable pull-in. With regard to the strength training anatomy, when we are doing a low pulley cable pull-in, we are focusing on trunk flexion. So because we're doing trunk flexion, that is primarily going to be the rectus abdominis, the external oblique, internal oblique, and we're going to be getting some assistance from the psoas major. We are also going to be doing hip flexion. So when we do hip flexion, that is primarily going to be the iliopsoas, so the psoas major and the iliacus, as well as the rectus femoris, the sartorius, the tensor fasciae lati muscle, or the TFL, the pectineus, the adductor longus, and the adductor brevis. Now, with regard to the low pulley cable pull-in, the way that I'm going to be performing it is I'm going to be placing a rolled up towel underneath my lumbar spine. And the reason that I'm going to be doing that is because by placing the rolled up towel, I'm going to be starting the position in lumbar extension. So by getting into lumbar extension, I'm going to be creating a nice pre-stretch on the fascia of the abdominal cavity. So I'm going to be in extension, which means, and I'm going to have more myofascial tension, and I'm going to be able to recruit more muscle fibers during the exercise. If you guys don't have a towel to roll up, or if you just find it uncomfortable, you could just do it regularly. For me personally, I really love doing it with a rolled up towel. Aside from just getting more recruitment from the abdominals due to the greater myofascial tension, we're also going to be able to get more trunk flexion. My goal when I do this is on every single repetition, I want my sacrum to lift up off the ground and really get that trunk flexion. In 3, 2, 1, 1. Hold, 1, 2, hold, hold. Thanks for sticking around until the end of the video. Be sure to like, share, and leave a comment as it'll help the algorithm. And if you enjoyed the content, show your support by subscribing to the channel by clicking on the icon in the bottom right corner. And if you really want to show your support, then consider becoming a member by clicking on the icon in the bottom left corner. These new high-quality videos aren't cheap to edit, and the $5 membership will really help with the video editing budget. You'll also get access to a ton of exclusive perks like early access to videos and this program design lecture playlist in the top right-hand corner. And if you want to learn how to do a one-armed pull-up, then check out the playlist on the top left corner.